Alright, in this video, we're going to continue on with chapter 14, and I believe we're going on to publishing a crate to crates.io. We've used packages from crates.io as dependencies of our project, but you can also share your code with other people by publishing your own packages. The crate registry at crates.io distributes the source code of your packages, so it primarily hosts code that is open source. Yeah, I'm not sure if that last sentence made complete sense, but overall I get what they're trying to say. We've used other people's packages, and if we want to, we can share our code by publishing to crates.io. And they have the link here, so we can open up real quick to see what it looks like. It's a big green page with less not green in the center. And you can search through here. I've looked through here a couple times. It's pretty intuitive. But let's go back. Rust and Cargo have features that help make your published package easier for people to use and to find in the first place. We'll talk about some of these features next and then explain how to publish a package. Okay, let's go over some of these features. Making useful documentation comments. Accurately documenting your packages will help other users know how and when to use them, so it's worth investing the time to write documentation. In Chapter 3, we discuss how to comment Rust code using two slashes. // Rust also has a particular kind of comment for documentation, known conveniently as the documentation comment, that will generate HTML documentation. The HTML displays the content of documentation comments for public API items intended for programmers interested in knowing how to use your crate as opposed to how your crate is implemented. Okay? That was a very, very long sentence, that last one. A lot of big words and a lot of long words. But essentially, what they're saying is that yes, we know how to do comments with two slashes, but Rust also has documentation comments that we can use to generate HTML documentation. And this is to show people how to use the package or crate as a whole, as opposed to the implementation. It's not to tell people how you wrote it, it's to tell people how to use it. Documentation comments use 3 slashes, / instead of 2, and support markdown notation for formatting the text. Place documentation comments just before the item they're documenting. Listing 14-1 shows documentation comments for the add one function in a crate named myCrate. We should probably write this just to see what it's like. So they have a source.lib. Currently we don't have a source.lib. Source, we have a source main. Let's create a new file. New Rust file. Let's call you lib. That should work. Should it work? We'll find out. Source, lib, rs. Cool. Close that. And then they have a bunch of stuff here. It's mainly just this documentation, so just copy and paste it. It does highlight nice. Okay, cool. See what they have here. We have adds 1 to the number given. So add 1 takes in an x of I32 and returns an I32 and just adds 1 to it. So here's an example. We have let argument equal 5. Let answer equal myCrate, : add 1 arg, and we assert that it's 6. And that looks like a documentation test, but they'll explain that in a second. So let's make this big and continue. Alright, we did that portion. Here, we give a description of what the add one function does. Start a section with the heading examples, and then provide code that demonstrates how to use the add one function. We can generate the HTML documentation from this documentation comment by running cargo doc. This command runs the Rust doc tool distributed with Rust and puts the generated HTML documentation in the target/doc directory. let's see if that's true. Terminal. They said cargo dock, right? And it's doing something. It's building something. And it has the documentation. Dev. Profiles. And in our target, we should see something that says doc. And in here we have some files. We have a number of files in here actually. Okay. Main.js. Source. Do we have an index? Oh, wait, there's the chapter. My file name for the IDE or this project is Rust section 13, chapter 13, section 4. It's not that, but still. And then here we have the index. So, open index? Yeah, I can't do that on this computer. So if we want to open this file, let me figure out where I am. Present working directory. Let's do Firefox index. Does that work? Oh, that does work. Cool. Huh. Understood. You can do Firefox and then you can pass in the HTML file. Oh. And here we have create, the project name, which I definitely should have changed that. I'm sorry I didn't. We have add one, adds 1 to the number given, and that looks clickable, so we can click into it. And then we see all the stuff we have here. So we have the create, project name, the function, which is add one. We have the signature, which you can clearly see. And we have a section called examples, which right there with one hashtag. And in the examples, we have this thing, which is highlighted, or in this code block. That's actually pretty cool. All right, let's go back and continue. For convenience, running cargo doc -- open will build the HTML for your current crate documentation, as well as the documentation for all of the crate's dependencies, and open the result in a web browser. Navigate to add one function, and you'll see how the text in the documentation comments is rendered as shown in listing 14-1. So we already looked at how it's rendered, but I am curious about that cargo open thing, because that would have saved me a hell of a lot of time. So let's try this again. Terminal. Actually, where am I? Oh, I gotta go back. There we go. Cargo doc open. Yeah, that's the same thing. I could definitely have used that command. Understood. And it did in Firefox. Props. Close that, close that. So their figure is the same thing we saw. I guess one thing I didn't click on was the side. They called theirs My Crate. That's the name of their project. Add one, crate, clicked into it. We saw that example. Moving on. Commonly used sections. We use the hashtag example markdown heading in listing 14-1 to create a section in the HTML with the title examples. Here are some other sections that crate authors commonly use in their documentation. Panics, the scenarios in which the function being documented could panic. Callers of the function who don't want their program to panic should make sure they don't call the function in these situations. Okay. Errors. If a function returns a result, describing the kind of errors that might occur and what conditions might cause those errors to be returned can be helpful to callers so they can write code to handle the different kinds of errors in different ways. That makes sense. Safety. If the function is unsafe to call, we discuss unsafety in chapter 19, there should be a section explaining why the function is unsafe and covering the invariants that the function expects callers to uphold. Alright, so let's go over that real quickly. So what they're saying here is commonly used sections. And there are 3 commonly used sections, which are important to document because if I was writing code and I was using somebody else's crate, I would want to know these things. The first one they list is panics, which is pretty much if I'm using your crate, you should tell me the scenarios in which your code, the code that I'm not writing but I am using, may panic, because that affects the way I handle errors. Errors is another section, and this is important because if I'm using somebody's package, their crate in this case, could return an error. And if it does return an error, I have to explicitly handle that error, which means I have to both know of the error and understand different ways I should go about handling what the error actually means in terms of the context, things like that. Things to help me. More information. That's what I need. And then safety. This one I know nothing about because unsafe is not something we discussed yet. Unsafe happens in chapter 19. This is chapter 14. We still have 5 more chapters, possibly 6 if you count going through all of chapter 14, before we understand what is unsafe. But that's a thing. Keep it noted. Most documentation comments don't need all of these sections, but this is a good checklist to remind you of the aspects of your code that people calling your code will be interested in knowing about. Next, documentation comments as test. Adding example code blocks in your documentation comment can help demonstrate how to use your library, and doing so has an additional bonus. Running cargo test will run the code examples in your documentation as tests. Nothing is better than documentation with examples, but nothing is worse than examples that don't work because the code has changed since the documentation was written. Yes, this is very true. Keep this in mind. This is something that I hate when I'm looking at a project and I'm trying to learn it, is when they have documentation, they have examples, code examples, but those code examples no longer work because everything in the library of their package has changed. It has changed to such an extent that everything seems broken to me. At least that's the impression I get. Everything is broken because the examples don't work. Well, it's not necessarily the case. It just means that the examples in most cases are just old and shouldn't work. But you don't know that going into a project. So yeah, examples, keeping examples up to date is very important to me. If we run cargo tests with the documentation for the add one function from listing 14-1, we will see a section in the test result like this. And they have a run test here. Where is it? Running test, add one, okay, test, okay, failed filter out. Oh, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. Doc test, my crate. It's not going to say my crate for me, but we can do that too. Cargo tests. And it failed. Wow. Couldn't compile tests. It's still looking for my crate. Failed to resolve the undeclared type or module my crate. Libs 714. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ah, I see. Because this project isn't called my crate. It's called what I have up there. I can probably fix that real quick. Hold on. You know what? I'll just make a project called my crate. New project. Rust. My crate. And make it a library. Create this window. Open it up. Source, libs. You can stay there. I don't. And they have a testing in here. But now let's run this. Cargo test. Now we see the doc test my crate, and we ran it and it ran successfully. Bam. We also have another test called it works, but that because I just created a new project, then it comes with that when you create a new library. Anyway, moving onward. So yeah, we just saw this. This is the doc test portion of our cargo test. Now, if we change either the function or the example, so the assert equal in the example panics, and run cargo test again, we'll see that the doc test catch that the example and the code are out of sync with each other. And for the hell of it, let's do that. Take away this +1. Things are different. Now we're going to run cargo test again. And we see a failure. And this failure is in the doc test. Okay, so if you had this in, I don't know, CI, configure continuous integration, if you had some sort of testing setup so that anytime you push, you ran your test, or anytime before you push, you ran your test, it will get caught. That's good. That's good to know. Let's add this +1. Because I don't like red. I don't like red at all. Good, it's passing again. And commenting contained items. Another style of doc comment is // exclamation mark. Adds documentation to the item that contains the comments rather than adding documentation to the items following the comments. We typically use these doc comments inside the crate root file, source lib.rs, by convention, or inside a module to document the crate or the module as a whole. For example, if we want to add documentation that describes the purpose of the myCrate crate that contains the add1 function, we can add documentation comment that starts with // exclamation point to the beginning of the source/libs.rs file, as shown in listing 14-2. And here's what they added. Control copy. Put it at the top of U. Paste. And then we can do the cargo doc -- open. And yeah, now at the header page, we see this stuff, the stuff at the top. My crate, and this is how you get the / is how you get the gray. Is a collection of utilities to make performing certain calculations more convenient. And then this is where the start of the 3 slashes comes in. And that is the top of here. So that is add 1 to the number given. You have a space, and then when we click through, we see the examples. This makes sense. And if you click on my crate, it brings you back to the top, and functions. Guess it doesn't show you all the functions, huh? In this page, it shows you functions. But okay. Understood. Notice there isn't any code after the last line that begins with // exclamation point. Because we started the comment with // exclamation point instead of ///, we are documenting the item that contains the comment rather than the item that follows this comment. In this case, the item that contains the comment is the source/libs.rs file, which is the crate root. These comments describe the entire crate. When we run cargo doc open, these comments will display on the front page of the documentation for my crate above the list of public items in the crate, as shown in listing 14-2. We saw this. Moving on. Documentation comments within items are useful for describing crates and modules especially. Use them to explain the overall purpose of the container to help your users understand the crate's organization. Okay? Exporting a convenient public API with pub use. In Chapter 7, we covered how to organize our code into modules using the mod keyword, how to make items public using the pub keyword, and using how to bring items into scope with the use keyword. However, the structure that makes sense to you while you're developing a crate might not be very convenient for your users. You might want to organize your structs in a hierarchy containing multiple levels, but then people who want to use a type you've defined deep in the hierarchy might have trouble finding out that that type exists. They might also be annoyed having to enter use, my crate, submodule, another module, useful type, rather than use my crate, useful type. Okay, so what they're illustrating here is, in chapter 7, we talked about mods, we talked about the pub keyword to make things public, and the use keyword to import things, right? And in that chapter, we also talked about nesting our code in structures that make sense to us. Like putting, I think at that time we were talking about like musical instruments and putting the flutes with each other, something along those lines. In summary, it's nesting code in ways that make sense when we're writing it. However, that same logic does not always make sense when we're using a package. And the example they illustrated is having my crate, some module, another module, and then useful type. If somebody had to write this every time they could use this useful type, that could be annoying. And it doesn't really make sense in terms of why they're going through all those steps. When they could simply just write my crate, useful type, which is kind of direct and straight to the point. So yeah, they're about to go over how we can still keep this type of hierarchy when writing our project, but export in such a way that when somebody uses our project, they only have to type this. The structure of your public API is a major consideration when publishing a crate. People who use your crate are less familiar with the structure than you are, and might have difficulty finding the pieces they want to use if your crate has a large module hierarchy. The good news is that if the structure isn't convenient for others to use from another library, you don't have to rearrange your internal organization. Instead, you could re-export items to make a public structure that's different from your private structure by using pub-use. Re-exporting takes a public item in one location and makes it public in another location, as if it were defined in that other location instead. Oh, I see. So yeah, so what they were talking about up here, right? When we had this thing was defined in this location. But we don't want people to write all that when trying to use it. We want them to write this. In order for them to write this, what we can do is we can re-export this type in another location. And they seemingly did it at the top of the crate, just to make it easy to use. For example, say we made a library named Art for modeling artistic concepts. Within this library are two modules, a kinds module that contains two enums named primary color and secondary color, and a utils module containing a function named mix, as shown in listing 14-3. So yeah, we have the project documentation for Art with the header Art, yeah. Oh, it's an Art library. The crate or package is named Art. We have this module, which is exported, kinds. So there's two colors, the primary color and the secondary color. And then we have another module called utils that uses kinds, crate, top of the crate, kinds, goes in here and imports all of them. So both primary and secondary color. And then here we have the function mix, which mixes the primary color and the secondary color. Sorry, which mixes the primary color and a primary color and produces a secondary color. That's interesting. That doesn't even work like logically, because you can technically put two red in here, and then your secondary color would be red, but that's not an option here. So seemingly you can only put one type of primary or one type of primary here. They can't be the same. But that's beside the point. Let's stick to the example. Figure 14-3 shows what the front page of the documentation for this crate generated by Cargo Doc would look like. Create Art, We have art, a library for modeling artistic concepts, and we have the modules, which is, okay, art, you have the statement there, and these are the two modules that were within it. They get listed here. Interesting. Is this in the same package? Hold on. No, this is, oh, this is within source.libs? Oh, I can copy this over. Let me try to see if that works. Control copy. Put you right here. And then let's do cargo doc to see what we get. Oh, that didn't mark. So I'm really confused as to how they have both my crate. Did they delete everything else? I think they did delete everything else. Aw, that's sad. Alright, so I have to delete this stuff in order to see it. Meh. So for those, if you didn't notice, the error was that I have inner documentation comments that start with the exclamation point that appear after other type of comments, seemingly. Like this came too low in the file. And okay. But yeah, this is what they have. This is what I see. However, I do not see the art thing here. How did they get that there? That I'm curious about. They have art. I don't know if this is the right file. I am curious. I'm gonna try one thing, and then if it doesn't work out the way I planned it, do something else. So I'm gonna put that stuff back. I want to get rid of that stuff. And I want to see if I create another file. And let's call this art.rs. And if I paste that stuff into here and now run cargo doc, do I get both of them? Okay, it sees the lib, but it doesn't see the other one. Understood. Yeah, they did some magic that they're not explaining. I don't like that. Because we definitely do not see this. Anyway, let's continue onward. Note that the primary color and secondary color types aren't listed on the front page, nor is the mix function. We have to click kind and utils to see them. Okay. Another crate that depends on this library would need use statements that bring the items from art into scope, specifying the module structure that's currently defined. Listing 14-4 shows an example of a crate that uses the primary color and mix items from the art crate. And this is where it kind of gets annoying. We would have art, kind, primary color, art, utils, mix. And then for primary color, we do red. Primary color, yellow. That makes sense. That's fine. Then we mix red and yellow. I don't know what color that gives. I'm bad with colors. The author of the code in listing 14-4, which uses the art crate, had to figure out that primary color is in the kinds module and mix is in the utils module. The module structure of the art crate is more relevant to developers working on the art crate than the developers using the art crate. The internal structure that organizes part of the crate into the kinds module and the utils module doesn't contain any useful information for someone trying to understand how to use the art crate. Instead, the art crate's module structure causes confusion because developers have to figure out where to look. and the structure is inconvenient because developers must specify the module names in the use statements. Alright, so what they're going over here is just trying to emphasize the core difference between when you create a library or lib or package in general, and when you're using it. So when you're creating it, specifying the primary color as a kind and putting mix in utils makes sense. However, if I were using this, if I was trying to use this and I didn't look at the source code, then I might spend a lot of time trying to figure out what I can pass into a mix. Yeah, I'll look at the documentation. Well, first I would have to find mix, and mix is nested under utils, which, as you saw, is not on the front page. You have to click through it to get to it. And then post that, I'll see, oh, in the signature has primary color. And then have to searching for primary color. This is not necessarily annoying, can be annoying, but more a waste of time for the person that's trying to use your library, and super confusing. That's the point they're trying to get across there. So moving onward. To remove the internal organization from the public API, we can modify the arg-create code in listing 14-3 to add public use statement to re-export the items at the top level, as shown in listing 14-5. So another thing we can do is at the top level we can re-export them, and that is this. So everything else can stay the same, but then we can export them again. And that should change the way things look. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, they even have the category for exports. That's useful. So come down here and we have the API documentation that CargoDoc generates for this crate will now list the link re-exports on the front page as shown in 14-4, making the primary color and secondary color types and the mix function easier to find. That makes sense. They're putting it on the top page and they're listing as re-exports. So one, that tells the person that's using it where exactly they can find if they were to try to go into the source code. They look in the kinds and look in the utils to find these respectively. But also it tells them, since it's on the first page, somebody looking at the documentation will see it immediately and then know I could use this. And it's probably, you can probably just click through. Actually, let's test that out. Let's put this. We gotta delete stuff, don't we? They didn't really care about this. Let me copy this, go back to libs, delete all of this, put this in there, and then get this re-export stuff going. Copy, just to see what it looks like. Paste. Hopefully this works. And it opened. So yeah. So now that we have it here, I assume that we can just click through to them. So we click on primary color, and it brings us to that page. Kind, primary color, and it shows the different variants of this enum, which is red, blue, and yellow. Yeah, that's super useful. And for mix, if I click through, shows me the definition. And clicking on secondary color brings me secondary color. I like this. I like this a lot. Alright, let's continue onward. The arg-create users can still see and use the internal structure from listing 14-3 as demonstrated in listing 14-4. Or they can use the more convenient structure in listing 14-5 as shown in listing 14-6. Ah, I see. So what they're saying here is that once you re-export something, the user now has the option of using the re-exported version, art, primary color, or if they want to, they can still use this version. Both work. In cases where there are many nested modules, re-exporting the types at the top level with public use can make a significant difference in the experience of people who use the crate. Creating a useful public API structure is more of an art than a science, and you can iterate to find the API that works best for your users. Choosing pub use gives you flexibility in how you structure your crate internally and decouple the internal structure from what you present to your users. Look at some of the code of crates you've installed to see if their internal structure differs from their public API. This is more or less just summarizing what we just learned, which is you can have an internal structure and you can have a public structure. And also creating a good public structure, like the structure that other people who come to your project are using, is difficult. There's no right or wrong way to go about it. It's more of an art than a science. Look around, see what you like, see what you don't like, try things out.